Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my April 2021 reading wrap-up. This month I didn't read as much as I thought I was going to read. I started a new job, so I didn't have as much time as I would normally have, but I did manage to get 3 full novels and 3 novellas in, so I'm just going to go through all of them and chat about them. I also got a bunch of half reads in, there's 3 books I'm reading right now that I'm halfway through. I was kind of hoping to finish those, but then I kind of got distracted, or the book didn't pull me in as much as I thought it would. So yeah, my reading was kind of all over the place this month. But I do have 2 5-star reads this month, which I'm super excited about. I feel like that never happens. So let's dive right on in. Okay, so first up, this is a really, really old copy of this book, but this is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is, I believe, a 1938 Gothic novel. This is a novel that is considered a classic in Gothic lit that for some reason I had never read before. And I'd been hearing so much about it, Netflix just made a movie about it, that I decided I have to pick this up and read about it and see if it is worth the hype. So spoiler alert, this is a 5-star read. This book is 100% worth the hype. I adored this book. It is definitely a true to form Gothic novel. It is very, very much a slow burn. With a really interesting premise. It is about an unnamed character who works as a ladies' companion in the 1930s. While she's traveling with her employer, she does meet a very wealthy man who runs a manor called Manderley, and they basically fall in love, and she goes and lives with him on his big estate and has to live in the shadow of his ex-wife, who died a very tragic and mysterious death a year ago. This is one of the most beautiful books I have ever read. I really, really like the main character. She's an amazing story arc. I really like how female focused it is. I loved all of the twists and turns in this novel. I loved the idea of someone's lingering presence being a ghost versus actually seeing a ghost. I thought that was a very, very well done thing. And of course, with all Gothic novels, the atmosphere and the sprawling estate manor is of course a character in and of itself. And I thought Manderley was a beautiful and terrifying setting, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I highly, highly, highly recommend reading it if you haven't. I can't believe I haven't read this before. I mean, this book just blew me away. It is so beautifully written. It is such an interesting concept. The main character really does have a very solid story and character arc, and I really enjoyed following it, but I really loved watching our unnamed heroines' full journey, and I adore this book, and I think if you've never read it, you should absolutely check it out. Next up, I read Whisper Down the Lane, which is the latest release from Clay McLeod Chapman. I got this in my April 2021 Nightworms box. Actually, I read all of the books from my April 2021 Nightworms box this month, so I will have all of those discussed here. This is a really interesting book. This was a 4-star read for me, and I do have an entire video review up on this book, so I won't go too in-depth into it. But it is about a little boy in the 1980s who gets swept up in the satanic panic and becomes a very pivotal witness in a trial against his teacher. And then if you fast forward to 2013, basically him as an adult living with the consequences of what he did as a child. I really enjoyed this book. It wasn't anywhere near as scary as I thought it was going to be. It was definitely a little more psychological, and a lot of the horror were more situational. Yeah, they were more, it was more of a situational horror, I would say, where there weren't actual scary entities, but it was putting children in these very compromising positions and these very tragic positions that made this book scary and uncomfortable to read. I did love this book quite a lot. I didn't adore it. I did think that it could have been better. It could have been a little more polished. It could have had a little more satanic panic in it. I kind of felt like it was just kind of a given that it was the satanic panic of the 80s and that we were just kind of supposed to accept it. But yes, if you are into true crime, this book references a lot of things that were very prominent in true crime cases in the 1980s and 90s, and I think you will really enjoy it if you like that. Okay, third, and I also do have a full video review on this book. This is my second 5-star read of the month. This is December Park by Ronald Malfi. I have read a bunch of Malfi before, and I have posted a lot about him on my channel and my Instagram. I think Ronald Malfi is one of those authors that is so underrated, and we need to be reading him so much more, and this is by far the best book I have read from him. It is his coming-of-age story. Again, if you are a fan of Stephen King's It, read this. This book is incredible. It, instead of being about like middle schoolers though, this is about teenagers. The characters in this novel are all about 16 years old, and it's about a 5 group of kind of like grunge rock kids in the 90s going after the serial killer that is plaguing their small town in Maryland. The twist ending of this I thought was great. I thought this was one of the best, most well-polished, relatable coming-of-age stories I have ever read. It really hinges on the idea of a coming-of-age story in the horror genre being a metaphor for growing up in real life. I think this one really nails that concept on the head way more intensely than many of the other coming-of-age stories that I've read have. I think Ghoul comes very close to kind of the themes and concepts that you will see in December Park. Ghoul by Brian Keene, that is. Well, it is still my favorite coming-of-age novel of all time. This is definitely a close second. There's a chance that this book is now in my top 10 favorite books of all time. Actually, I would go straight up and say it's definitely in my top 10 favorite books of all time. I obsessively... I can't recommend this book enough. I just go into it knowing that this is an amazing coming-of-age novel. It is not as scary as some of the other classic horror coming-of-age novel stories is. It is definitely more of like a thriller, but I do really love it. I think everybody should take a look at it, and it will blow your mind, hopefully, because it blew my mind. I'm going to start with Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. This is the latest novella by V. Castro. I did get this in my April 2021 Nightworms package, and I had such high hopes for this. I'm going to read the back to this one really quickly. And it says, one hot summer night, best friends Lords, Fernanda, Anna, Perla, and Pauline hold a seance. It's all fun and games at first, but their tipsy laughter turns to terror when the flames burn straight through their prayer candles and Fernanda starts crawling toward her friends and chanting in Nahuatl, the language of their Aztec ancestors. Over the next few weeks, shy, modest Fernanda starts acting strangely, smearing herself in black makeup, shredding her hands on rose thorns, sucking sin out of the mouths of the guilty. The local priest is convinced it's a demon, but Lords begin to suspect it's something else, something far more ancient and powerful. I really wanted to love this book. It was marketed to me as like kind of like a Mexican spin on the movie The Craft from the 90s, which is what I really wanted it to be, and unfortunately it is not. There is almost no witchcraft in this. The closest thing that they get to like occultism in this book is the seance in the very first chapter, which was like the laziest written seance I think I've ever seen in a novel. If you want to see a really good seance, read The Deep by Alma Katsu. That has an amazing seance scene in it. But this one was extremely lazy writing. It was marketed as a very feminist book. I have a huge problem with that. Look, you're not a feminist story if the like subtext of your story is you need somebody else to take control of your body in order to like be the person you want to be. That sends so many horrible mixed messages, and the fact that that is core to this book is a huge problem for me. The girls in the story I think are so cliche of like a teenage girl. Like there's a scene where they think their friend is possessed, and instead of taking her to a hospital or to an exorcism, either of those or better options than what they did, they take her to a nightclub. They sneak an underage girl into a nightclub. And then what happens in the nightclub is just more laziness on her friend's part. Like her friends couldn't even watch her to like protect her from like scary predators at the club. Like there's just so much wrong with the decisions these girls make, and them being poor decision makers doesn't actually add to the storyline for me at all. The storyline is a total muddied mess. There's like 3 different like plot points going on throughout the whole book of like, does one person end up going to college? Is one person possessed? Is the priest evil? Like, and they don't really converge until the very end, and it feels so like just thrown together and like just forced to be one narrative, and it just made no sense to me, and I had such high hopes for this. And I mean, this is a short book. It's like 140 pages, and it just found a way to fit so much information that really didn't add up to anything into one teeny tiny book, and it just made me angry because I really, really wanted this to be a very empowering female story. And I would have loved if it had centered on witchcraft, but it really didn't do any of that. And I found a lot of the feminist tones to be very unfeminist, just completely unfeminist. And I get the point that V. Castro was trying to make with this book, but I really, really felt like she just missed the mark, and it left me very, very disappointed. This was a 2-star read from me. A feminist book should not tell the reader that somebody else has to have control of their body in order for them to be the woman they're supposed to be. Okay? Next up, this is the last book from my April 2021 Nightworms box, and this is Scanlines by Todd Keisling. I'm gonna say Keisling. Whoo, this book is dark. Luckily, this was a 4-star read from me, and this is like a trigger warning. This book talks very, very, very heavily of suicide. I'll read the back of this book for you guys as well, because I think it summarizes it up very well. In 1987, Congressman Benjamin Hardy III died by suicide on live television amidst accusations of political corruption. Years later, rumors of a recording surfaced among VHS trading groups and urban legend chat rooms, dubbed the Duncan tape after the deceased cameraman who attempted to sell the video. The rumors allege that anyone who watches the tape is driven to suicide, or so the story goes. In truth, no one has ever seen the supposed Duncan tape, presumably because it doesn't exist. It's a ghost story perpetuated on the forums and chat rooms of the internet. Another handful of bytes scattered across the information superhighway at blistering 56K modem speeds. For Robbie and his friends, an urban legend is the last thing on their minds, when a boring Friday night presents a chance to download porn. But the short clip they watch turns out to be something far more graphic and disturbing, and in the coming days, they'll learn even the most outlandish urban legends possess a shred of truth. So I really like this book. I find this book really difficult to talk about. When I first read the premise, I thought it was going to be very much like the concept of The Ring, the movie, or the books, whatever. I've only seen the movie. And it's not. It's very much a metaphor for depression and suicidal tendencies, and it's kind of written almost in the vein of like a coming of age story and like the horror genre, but not really. I always say that you shouldn't need to read the author's notes at the end of a book to really get the book. I can only think of like one other book that I think that you actually should, and that's Cabin at the End of the World. But this one, I do think that to get a full understanding of the book, the author's note at the very end does need to be included. I think once you know where Todd Keisling is coming from with his narrative, it opens up the book quite a lot more. I really, really liked this. This is disturbing, it is graphic, it is uncomfortable, it is really sad, but it does a really, really good job at basically explaining depression in a way that maybe people who don't have depression or mental health problems might actually understand a little bit more. It's a really, really good metaphor. Again, it is very dark, it is very sad, it's very gut-wrenching, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. I read it in like a day. It's really short. It's like 100 pages, I think. Yeah, it's 113 pages or so. But yeah, don't read this if the topics in this novel are something that you are uncomfortable with, because it is just, we're going to really hammer in those topics. But I do think it was very tastefully done, and I do recommend it. So 4 stars. And then last but not least, I went on Independent Bookstore Day, and I was able to get the first time in book form in the tall grass, signed by Stephen King and Joe Hill. I'm so excited. As you know, Stephen King is my favorite author of all time, and I love Joe Hill. Joe Hill wrote one of my favorite books of all time, which is Heart-Shaped Box. So I was very excited to get this and to read it. I had never read In the Tall Grass. I haven't seen the movie either, even though I have heard it isn't that good, but whatever. This was a 4-star read for me. It's really cool because when you read it, you can definitely feel both King and Hill's different styles in there. Stephen King is so character driven and so focused on details to really like nail the horror, whereas Joe Hill, I feel, is really into kind of these like visceral moments and like kind of like shock and awe. And I think they pair up really, really well together for this story. I'll read the back as well. In the Tall Grass begins with a sister and brother who pull off of the road after hearing a young boy crying for help from beyond the tall grass. Within minutes, they are disoriented in deeper than seems possible, and they've lost one another. The boy's cries are more and more desperate. What follows is terrifying, entertaining, and masterfully told tale as Stephen King and Joe Hill can deliver. And I think that's absolutely accurate. This book does a really good job at making the reader feel the fears of isolation and being trapped and deceived. I think it's a really, really good story. I will give it a pass. There's definitely like a moment of like classic Stephen King cosmic horror thrown in. You don't know why. But I'll give it a pass for this story because it does actually really fit well with what's going on. The ending is really dark. It's really upsetting too if you like really dig into it, but I really did like it. It gives me a lot of Children of the Corn vibes as well. And it is just a very fun, brief, disturbing read. I don't really want to get too much into it because I just think it's definitely worth one of those rides. I do know that it was originally published serially in 2 parts, I believe in Esquire magazine. And you kind of see when you read it like where that cutoff point is. And the cliffhanger of the book I think is really good because you're right there and you're like, oh man, I really want to know what the hell is going on. It just doesn't give you anything, so you need you feel the need to keep reading it. And that just to me shows like the masterful writing skills of Stephen King. And then of course having Joe Hill's more, I don't want to say gory approach, but more blunt approach to horror to kind of balance out King's like implications and descriptive horror. I think is a really, really nice balance. It didn't feel like a Stephen King story to me, and it didn't feel like a Joe Hill story to me, but it definitely felt like a King-Hill collaboration, and I think that's why I appreciate it that much. All right, anyway, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday. If you enjoyed this video, please hit those like and subscribe buttons down below. It helps me out quite a lot. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Mwah. Bye.